Maya and the Conception of God, Part 2. With the advance of ethical ideas came the fight. There arose a certain sense in man, called in different languages and nations by different names. Call it the voice of God or the result of past education or whatever else you like. But the effect was this, that it had a checking power upon the natural impulses of man. There is one impulse in our minds which says do. Behind it rises another voice which says do not. There is one set of ideas in our minds which is always struggling to get outside through the channels of the senses, and behind that, although it may be thin and weak, there is an infinitely small voice which says do not go outside. The two beautiful Sanskrit words for these phenomena are pravitri and nivitri, circling forwards and circling inwards. It is the circling forwards which usually governs our actions. Religion begins with this circling inwards. Religion begins with this do not. Spirituality begins with this do not. When the do not is not there, religion has not begun. And this do not came, causing men's ideas to grow despite the fighting gods which they had worshipped. A little love awoke in the hearts of mankind. It was very small indeed, and even now it is not much greater. It was at first confined to a tribe, embracing perhaps members of the same tribe. These gods loved their tribes, and each god had a tribal god, the protector of that tribe. And sometimes the members of a tribe would think of themselves as a descendant of their god, just as the clans in different nations think that they are a common descendant of the man who was the founder of the clan. There were in ancient times and are even now some people who claim to be descendants not only of these tribal gods but also of the sun and the moon. You read in the ancient Sanskrit books of the great heroic emperors of the solar and the lunar dynasties. They were first worshippers of the sun and the moon and gradually came to think of themselves as descendants of the god of the sun, of the moon, and so forth. So, when these tribal ideas began to grow, there came a little love, some slight idea of duty towards each other, a little social organization. Then, naturally, the idea came, how can we live together without bearing and forbearing? How can one man live with another without having some time or other to check his impulses, to restrain himself, to forbear from doing things which his mind would prompt him to do? It is impossible. Thus came the idea of restraint. The whole social fabric is based upon that idea of restraint, and we all know that the man and woman who has not learned the great lesson of bearing and forbearing leads a most miserable life. Now, when these ideas of religion came, a glimpse of something higher, more ethical, dawned upon the intellect of mankind. The old gods were found to be incongruous, both boisterous, fighting, drinking, beef eating gods of the ancient, whose delight was in the smell of burning flesh and libation of strong liquor. Sometimes Indra drank so much that he fell upon the ground and talked unintelligibly. These gods could no longer be tolerated. The notion had arisen of inquiring into motives, and the gods had to come in for their share of inquiry. Reason for such and such actions was demanded, and the reason was wanting. Therefore, man gave up these gods, or rather, they developed higher ideas concerning them. They took a survey, as it were, of all the actions and qualities of the god and discarded those which they could not harmonize, and kept those which they could understand and combined them, labeling them with one name, Deva Deva, and gods of Deva. The god to be worshipped was no more a simple symbol of power, something more was required than that. He was an ethical god. He loved mankind and did good to mankind. But the idea of God still remained. They increased his ethical significance and also increased his power. He became the most ethical being in the universe as well as almost almighty. But all this patchwork would not do. As the explanation assumed greater proportions, the difficulty which it sought to solve did the same. If the qualities of the God increased in arithmetical progression, the difficulty and doubt increased in geometrical progression. The difficulty of Jehovah was very little beside the difficulty of the God of the universe, and this question remains to the present day. Why, under the reign of an almighty and all loving God of the universe, should diabolical things be allowed to remain? Why so much more misery than happiness, and so much more wickedness than good? We may shut our eyes to all these things, but the fact still remains that this world is a hideous world. At best, it is the hell of Tantalus. Here we are with strong impulses and stronger cravings for sense enjoyment, but cannot satisfy them. There rises a wave which impels us forward in spite of our own will, and as soon as we move one step comes a blow. We are all doomed to live here like Tantalus. Ideas come into our head far beyond the limit of our sense ideals. But when we seek to express them, we cannot do so. On the other hand, we are crushed by the surging mass around us. Yet, if I give up all ideality and merely struggle through this world, my existence is that of a brute, and I degenerate and degrade myself. Neither way is happiness. Unhappiness is the fate of those who are content to live in this world, born as they are. A thousand times greater misery is the fate of those who dare to stand forth for truth and for higher things, and who dare to ask for something higher than mere brute existence here. These are the facts, but there is no explanation. There cannot be any explanation, but the Vedanta shows the way out. You must bear in mind that I have to tell you facts that will frighten you sometimes, but if you remember what I say, think of it and digest it. It will be yours. It will raise you higher and make you capable of understanding and living in truth. Now, it is a statement of fact that this world is a Tantalus hell, and we do not know anything about this universe. Yet, at the same time, we cannot say that we do not know. I cannot say that this chain exists when I think that I do not know it. It may be an entire delusion of my brain. I may be dreaming all the time. I am dreaming that I am talking to you and that you are listening to me. No one can prove that it is not a dream. My brain itself may be a dream, and as to that, no one has ever seen his own brain. We all take that for granted. So it is with everything. My own body I take for granted. At the same time, I cannot say I do not know. This standing between knowledge and ignorance, this mystic twilight, the mingling of truth and falsehood, and where they meet, no one knows. We are walking in the midst of a dream, half sleeping, half waking, passing all our lives in a haze. This is the fate of every one of us. This is the fate of all sense knowledge. This is the fate of all philosophy, of all boasted science, of all boasted human knowledge. This is the universe.